Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody for the session 6 of the second day. This session will be in English. We have a lot of speakers, so I will be kindly asking all of them to keep their 15 minutes time slot presentation so that we have time for discussion. The topic of today is something that we are watching not so much on mainstream TVs, but on social media for sure. Israel's genocide against Gaza and Palestinians. So this may also be a good time to note that organizers of this conference support International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice rulings on Israel's probable perpetration of genocide, as is specifically stated in the ruling, and arrest warrants for the Israel's Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, as well as Hamas leaders, all three of whom are now dead. We have various perspectives on Israel and conflict within the region. So there will be a lot of different discussions. We will start with Vala Amar Shehada. She is joining us from Belgium. She has just completed her PhD there and is presenting part of her research. Vala, you have 15 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dubravka. Good morning, everybody. I'm Wala Ammar, and I will be presenting part of my research about the experiences of the social experiences of Palestinian breast cancer survival in the Gaza Strip. This research was in collaboration with Professor Pete Bracke at the Sociology Department at Ghent University and Dr. Melissa. And I'm aware that many of you are familiar with the Gaza Strip and what's happening, but I thought also to start with a brief introduction about Gaza. Gaza is part of the occupied Palestinian territory since 1967, and it's under blockade since 2007. And since then, Gaza went through multiple aggressions and escalations, and the latest was on October the 7th, 2023. One of the main features in Gaza is the chronic displacement issues, where 2/3 of the population are refugees, whom origin are from what we call 1948 territory inside the historic Palestine. So the fact of having the occupation place, the blockade in place, had a profound impact on the social determinants of health and the health system itself. So when it comes to the organization of breast cancer, we found that about 2/3 of women with breast cancer are diagnosed at late stages. This is partly due to the absence of organized screening programs, but part of it also lacking access or the proper information on how to navigate their journey toward diagnosis and treatment. And what does that mean in practical terms? It means even if they were diagnosed, they still facing many challenges in accessing the treatment in the local health system in Gaza. So according to the latest annual report published by WHO, about 55% of their essential medical treatment, medicines, protocols are not available in Gaza. So in that case, what needs to be done is that these patients need to be referred outside the public health system that is in Gaza. So, but this is in itself is a very lengthy and bureaucratic procedure. So when the women from Gaza are lacking access to treatment locally, a decision at the local medical level needs to be taken that these patients need a referral outside the public health system in Gaza. If it's approved, then another medical approval needs to be taken at the Palestinian Authority Ministry of Health located in the West Bank. After that, a financial approval is needed. If approved, then they need to find a place in one of the destination hospitals that could be located in the West Bank, in Israel.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your sound is not always very clear. Can you maybe increase the sound a little bit?
Is it clear now?
Yeah, it's better if you're closer to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. So if they manage to secure a place in one of the destination hospital in the neighboring country, then they have to initiate a procedure to apply for what we call security clearance or permit application by the Palestinian Authority. Because since 2007, the population of Gaza are not allowed to freely move in and outside Gaza. Only certain humanitarian categories are allowed to exit the strip. So patients could be one of the categories, but there is no guarantee that they can do that. So after going through the permit application and security clearance, is there a guarantee that all of them will leave the strip for their destination hospital? No. Also, according to the latest annual report, only 60% of the patients were allowed to exit to reach their destination hospital. So this process in itself, together with the fact of being diagnosed with this traumatic illness, puts lots of pressure on these women while navigating their treatment, which brings me to the question of my research, the focus of my research, where I looked at two parts. The first part was how do socio-demographic factors and social positioning of women within Gaza affect their decision-making process to seek healthcare in the first instance? Because I tried to see why 2/3 of them are diagnosed at late stages. But then I looked at the received support that they received through the trajectory and their post-illness experiences in relation to the received support. I did that through a mixed method study where I collected data through a cross-sectional self-administrative survey, but also I complemented the data with a qualitative semi-structured interview. And in this presentation, I will only present the second part about the post-illness experiences due to time limitation. What kind of data I collected? I collected the socio-demographic data about the research population, their illness and treatment-related information, variables, but then also the kind of support that they received and from where. By support, I looked at the social support, emotional support, financial support, and then access to information support. And then I collected information about the perceived change in their social life in general, but I zoomed in more to their marriage and marital life. The data was analyzed, the quantitative data was analyzed through logistic regression analysis for the quantitative part and through a combination of grounded theory approach and framework analysis for the qualitative part. I will start by presenting the quantitative data. So 80% of the respondents said that they did receive support. Half of them said they received it in fully, but third of them, they received it partially. So it wasn't there all the time. It wasn't all the kind of support that they received. It was mainly by immediate family members, NGOs, spouses, and peers. We can readily see the absence of public health institutions in the support provision for this group. When it comes to changes, half of the respondents said that they did perceive negative changes in their social life after illness, while 40% said they had negative consequences on their marriage after illness. So I took these results and I went to a further level of analysis to see what kind of variables affected the perception, whether it's at the positive side or negative side. And I found that mothers, older women, single women were more likely to experience more positive consequences after illness, while among them, women who underwent mastectomy, lacking informal support, and divorced women were more likely to receive negative consequences. When I say mastectomy, I have to say that 95% of the respondents were underwent mastectomy. And again, this is part of the protocols that mastectomy is seen as the first to go option when they have no access to other treatment protocol. For example, radiotherapy is not available in Gaza. It's not allowed to be in Gaza due to the dual use list that is prohibited to in Gaza through the Israeli procedure in place. And when also we look at this variable, it's all connected to power in a different way. So motherhood is in itself a power in Gaza. So the fact of being married without having children is not in your favor as a woman. But also looking again at the mastectomy and looking at the body image of this woman, they were often seen as less perfect or incompetent, unhealthy. So in that way, it affects all their social roles in the community. At the marital level, again, mothers continue to have a more positive experience compared to non-mother, to the other woman, and women who underwent mastectomy lacking the support from their partners were most likely to perceive negative consequences. To complement that from the qualitative data, at the social level, the stigmatization of cancer and breast cancer, and specifically when it comes to the social role of woman as wife, was the most prominent factor, because they were often seen as awaiting death. So the awareness of a prognosis and early diagnosis versus advanced diagnosis and access to treatment was not there. So cancer was a taboo in the community. When it comes to marriage, I had different categories. So women with the more robust marriage, they managed, although they started uncertainty at the beginning, but with the support from partner, they managed to navigate the challenge together. Unlike women with a more fragile marriage, they did end in a way they are not separated, but the women are often abandoned. So the husband will seek to establish another family with another woman because the first woman, again, seen less competent or unhealthy or incapable to perform her role as a wife. And then she will be left abandoned or maybe threatened with the custody of her children again. And this will put extra pressure mentally on the group of women. There were certain groups where their social identities that they held, like again, mother being part of social support group, was a source of strength for them. So they acted also as an advocate, and they helped in raising awareness among the newly diagnosed patients, how to navigate their journey, how to act, how to behave, where to seek help, where to seek information from their experiences. This brings me to conclude that although these women as a group are subjected to kind of racial segregation policies from the occupation side, but also geographically biased policies, the fact of being in Gaza versus being from West Bank, because also the level of availability of medication was different between both groups, is still the position of women within the community affect where she will be on the spectrum of experiences. If she's holding certain social markers that help her to navigate the journey, like belonging to peer support group, married to supportive partner, it will be a totally different experience from women who's lacking access to these resources, which again brings me to the framework that I used for this study. I use the intersectionality perspective of structural discrimination, because for me, although they all departed from a central point of their health identity as breast cancer patients, still they can navigate their ways differently according to their age, to their marital status, but also according to their position within certain institutions in relation to marriage, in relation to health system, but also to what extent they can have access to navigate how they can overcome the barriers that was there due to structural policies that are in place, being from Gaza. Until that point, I was aiming to pinpoint certain recommendations for certain social processes and phenomena. But then in the last 15 months, we have seen that all these women, whether they are educated, employed, have access to support network or not, they all ended up in the same situation, being displaced in tents, losing all access to essential services, including treatment, including pain management services, etc. And then after the 15 months, they still went back to their places, but with the fact of not having housing units anymore, not having access to proper healthcare system, to proper education system, to the freedom of movement is not there as well. So this will open the discussion about the fact of addressing the root causes of such inequalities or lacking access to certain essential services needs a collective action for addressing the root causes of such discriminatory practices, not only bridging temporary gaps in making the medication available for a year or a month or two, but then without a sustainable solution, I would say, from the global power, international actors, but all the duty bearers that are responsible for the population in Gaza. I hope I'm on time. Thank you all.
You are. Thank you, Wala. Thank you. Next speaker is Aris Bishara. I hope I pronounced the name and surname properly.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. Okay, I want to share my screen. I hope you can hear me as well.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aris Bishara, as I'm a Palestinian political and organizational sociologist. I'm currently based in Scuola Normale Superiore as a research fellow. Today, my talk is titled Censoring Palestine, Unveiling the Hypocrisy and the Dehumanization Across Power Structures in Times of Genocide. This study seeks to uncover the mechanisms of dehumanization and censorship and how they are normalized in the Palestinian context, mainly after October 7th, but not only. Specifically, I will focus on how power structures like tech corporations, governments, media and social media, and academia sustain dehumanization and hypocrisy through censoring Palestine. Okay, now the current genocide in Gaza raises a critical question about the applicability and limitation of sociology, international law studies, and the human rights norms. Recent events since 2023, including the bombing of civilian sites, school structures, and health care buildings and universities, have prompted outrage and resignation from the UN officials who condemn the lack of accountability for apparent war crimes. However, powerful actors like the US and EU continue to provide Israel with diplomatic cover and material support, undermining, of course, the authority of international legal frameworks, as we've seen lately with the US and Israel. Accordingly, Wissam Ahmed, Palestinian human rights advocate at Al-Haq NGO in Ramallah, Palestine, said to Al Jazeera on October 17th in 2023, the mask that has long obscured the true nature and purpose of international law, the supposed foundation of the current global order, is finally off. As Palestinian cries for help from Gaza remain unanswered, the sinister truth is now undeniably out in the open. International justice, more often than not, is used as a tool to advance imperial interests and not justice. Ahmed's words here have sparked critical questions about hypocrisy within the ideals of human rights and the diversity, equity, and inclusion discourse in Western media, academia, and society. This hypocrisy is evident when the professed values and principles are contradicted by actual behaviors and practices, all of which are deeply embedded in censoring the knowledge reproduction around Palestine in order to dehumanize Palestinians and keep their interests in the region. This study that I'm conducting is actually Ahmed's words, raising one question of this study. How is the dehumanization of Palestine manifested across multiple power structures? To answer the research question, I'm using two theoretical approaches, dehumanization theory and necropolitics. Drawing on dehumanization theory, I rely on Nick Haslam's dual model, which identifies two forms of dehumanization: animalistic dehumanizations. Palestinians are denied a trait as such a moral sensibility and higher cognition, often portraying them as animalistic savages or terrorists. Second, mechanistic dehumanization. Palestinians are perceived as lacking individuality and emotional warmth, portrayed as devoid of normal aspiration and the essence of a human life. This framing is used to justify ongoing genocide and occupation since the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe, till today, since 1948 till today. Also, lands expand on the dehumanization framing with the infra-humanization model, which shows how indigenous groups, for example, are perceived as less human. This process is deeply ingrained and self-reinforcing, justifying domination and exploitation, essentially framing Palestinians as less deserving of humanity. And we are reaching also a point where there's a research of Philip Goff's unconscious dehumanization, which actually shape the consciousness of people who actually perceive Palestine and how they are affected by the media, of course, and the public discourse regarding Palestine and Gaza. In this context, I adapt this framework to examine how Western media portrays Palestinians and how they dehumanize them in sense of a part of their biased representation systematically actually includes Palestinians' voices, normalizes their suffering, and reinforces stereotypes that align with dominant political narratives. As a result, for example, the media here bias both reflects and perpetuates structural inequalities, influencing public opinion and policy decisions in ways that devalue Palestinians' humanity and agency. Which leads me to the second part of the framework. It's about the drawing on the necropolitics. I turn to Akile Membe's concept of necropolitics, which examines how colonial powers decide who gets to live and who must die, who gets to speak and who remains silent. Here in the Palestinian context, necropolitics is evident in policies such as forced displacement, genocide, and censorship. This perspective highlights how power structures frame Palestinians as uncivilized savages that must be silent and eliminated, thereby reinforcing the dehumanization process. In terms of the methodology, I seek to make some mixed method. It's a mixed method approach that combines discourse analysis of political rhetoric, media reports, organizational policies, and social media platforms within the interviews with 15 till 20 key informants involved in relevant advocacy or subjected to punitive actions. The discourse analysis will offer insights into the broader narratives, policies, and public discussions surrounding this specific topic that will amplify the experience and perspectives of those directly actually involved or affected. I'm focusing on three forms of dehumanization of Palestine: the physical dehumanization, the digital censorship, and the organizational silencing. In terms of the physical dehumanization, it's critically important to it has a lot to do with the first form of dehumanization is the physical elimination of Palestinians, which is deeply intertwined with the technological advancements and operational strategies employed by the Israeli military. Palestinians face a matrix of Israeli control, military checkpoints, segregated infrastructure, inequalities policies, and various colonial instruments of surveillance, including bureaucracies, digital occupation, and control over the Palestinian economy, airspace, electricity, and internet speed. Moreover, Palestine serves as a testing ground for unmanned warfare technologies designed by the Israeli military under the pretext of tech innovation. As Avner Ben Zaken, head of the technology and logistics division in the Israeli army, shared, if I develop a product and want to test it in the field, I only have to go 5 or 10 kilometers from my base and I can see what is happening with the equipment. I get feedback. So it makes the development process faster and much more efficient. Gaza, for example, is a site for testing formations of unmanned war, which many in Palestine refers to as a remote control occupation. And we see the consequences of it now on the ground. According to Israel, this experimentation is aimed at exploring and optimizing the integration of operational concepts with weapons development and surveillance technologies. However, this approach underscores how military advancements in the so-called startup nation ecosystem are directly linked to the dehumanization and physical elimination of Palestinians. These technologies, tested on Palestinians, not only serve military objectives, but also feed into global markets, exporting tools of occupation, further deepening military economic ties, and of course, collaborations between Israel and other countries. We see these ties, which provide substantial arms and technology transfers. Multinational corporations and create a global network that controls knowledge, develop surveillance technologies, and also legitimizes Israel's controls policies under the guise of innovation, ultimately censoring and dehumanizing the Palestinian narrative. Of course, part of it reflected in the image of Serbian soldier who joined the Israeli army to participate in the genocide of Palestinians in Israel. And you are fully aware of the collaboration and the help of Israel to Serbia against the war, in the war against Kosovo. And also reports suggest also that the Mossad also armed funded Serbian groups during this period. The second form of dehumanization is actually the digital censorship and silencing. And this is actually this part of this form of dehumanization specifically highlights the complicity of governments and global tech corporations like Meta, Google, etc., in marginalizing Palestinian advocacy and playing an active role developing AI systems and the cloud services to help the Israeli military with the genocide in Gaza. Of course, we see the censorship of Palestinian narrative and voices intensified during the genocide. Tech companies own, for example, has been implicated in this suppression effort. Hamli, the Arab Center of the Advancement of Social Media, issued a report highlighting the collaboration between Meta and the Israeli government in censoring Palestinian content, and so on and so on and so on. Moreover, also, for example, Israel has taken steps to prevent access to alternative media sources covering the events in Gaza, like Al Jazeera broadcasting was denying Israel citizens exposure to its new coverage of the situation on the ground. And lately, also in Palestine, as well as the Palestinian Authority also denied Al Jazeera to participate in broadcasting what's happening on Gaza on the ground, and also after the release of part of the Palestinian prisoners in the Israeli prisoners. These dynamics illustrate the paradoxical relationship between Palestine digital activism and the concurring efforts by powerful states and corporations to silence and erase Palestinians' narratives. But after the onset of the war, after that, even that actually, we see a lack of balance. For example, from the sorry, okay, here, okay, no, I just, we see actually a lack of balance here. For example, as Joseph Daher, which is underscores how the Western mainstream media defense of the Israeli narrative is deeply rooted in Orientalism, racism, and imperialism. We see, he noted, there is a widespread perception that despite the public's solidarity and concern for the suffering of the Palestinian people, these issues find little space within an international media system that has chosen to uncritically embrace the Israeli narrative. This media approach consistently emphasizes Hamas's responsibility while remaining silent on the massacre of civilians perpetrated by the Israeli occupation forces. We see it, for example, before October 7th in these images and how they deal with this. For example, one example is how the media often avoids assigning a responsibility for the deaths of Palestinians. Headlines like 4 fragile lives found ended in evacuated Gaza hospital. Obscure agency raising the question, who is responsible here? Similarly, in a widely circulated image, an Israeli soldier caught on video shooting a civilian in the West Bank is described by CNN as a man in military clothing rather than explicitly identified as a member of the IOF. The language used here in the media coverage often reflect the nationality of the victim, actively framing Palestinians as aggressors when Israeli lives are lost. Conversely, when Palestinians are the victims, media reports frequently omit a mention of the Israeli aggressor. The selective use of language perpetuates biased and distorted narratives, reinforcing harmful stereotypes and against Palestinians in the public perception. And this is how they shape and give legitimacy to demonizing and censoring Palestinian. But despite all that, by the way, despite we see also voices from Gaza. They try their best to convey their voices to show the world what is really happening in Gaza, such as we see people like Bisan Audis and also Mu'taz Azaizi. They are both a digital content creator and activist who actually become more and more activists on the social media platform. I'm sure if you follow those people, you know that how they, the work they are and the effort they put in the work. Yes.
Would you finish within 2 minutes?
Yes, of course. We see, and by the way, I just wanted to show you for just like to see that Mu'taz Azaizi actually has won also his photograph photo won some kind of time, maybe time, and this was his photo won some kind of prize. There we see the little lady under the rubble, and the last form of demonization is the organizational silencing. We see that the Israeli academia is complicit with the genocide on Gaza. We see we see it in different kind of how it manifested and how these relations between Israeli academia and the genocide in Gaza is actually vivid and is real. For example, the university serves as the central laboratory for the Israeli military and tech industry. And we see lately how the Tel Aviv University, for example, have opened some kind of unit, engineering operations room that developed advanced technologies for the Israeli military. And also and this has a lot to do and the consequences of the Palestinian academic community in the shadow of genocide. We see many Palestinian scholars like Professor Nadir Shalhoub and the students also were been expelled from the universities in Israel because of their support of their own and their support of ending this genocide, and of course we see the academia in Gaza has been demolished. Universities are under the rubble, and the question where are we heading right now? One of the most important professors there is, of course, as you can see in the picture, is one of the like some Rifat Al-Arir is one of the known professors in the Islamic University of Gaza that has actually been demolished as well. But I still have hope in the people of Gaza, and specifically in Majd, one of the lady that I interviewed with her. I finished my talk. Majd, she is an entrepreneur. She's trying to build Gaza from the rubble, with the rebels the remain rebels, without the help of the international community. So she's the brick lady, and Gaza is Palestine, and Gaza is not only about war, it's about hope. It's about people who want to have their own home back, their lands that they lost previously before for October 7th, and their self-determination and their right to live freely in their homeland without any expulsion or any genocides, just rebuilding their own home and trying to convey their own voices to let the world know that Gaza is not only about war, it's about people that want to live in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Aris. We have now Rosalba Belmonte. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I try to share my screen. Can you see it? Okay, thank
Yes.
you. So, first of all, good morning, everybody. I'm Rosalba Belmonte from Tuscia University, and today I'm presenting a part of my research about the Palestinian state building, actually about the failure of the Palestinian state building. The title is The End of the Palestinian National Project, The Obstacle to the Palestinian State Building. Indeed, although with the UN General Assembly's resolution, Status of Palestine in the United Nations, the name of the State of Palestine replaced that of Palestinian National Authority and Palestinian Liberation Organization in the official documents. An effective and an autonomous Palestinian state still not exist, and the events of the last 14 months let us think that we cannot expect the birth of Palestinian of a Palestinian state in the long-medium period. So today the management of the Palestinian territory in the West Bank is operated by the Palestinian National Authority that even it used to call itself State of Palestine, actually it has only administrative power, no monopoly of legitimate violence, limited control of water, mineral deposits, airspace, no autonomous monetary and fiscal policies, a dependency on international donors, and high inequality in terms of economic, political, and social development between the West Bank and Gaza. Even before the 7th of October. So all of these elements let us say that we cannot talk about a Palestinian state. So starting from these premises, the work that I'm presenting today aims to answer to two research questions. The first question is, what factors have hindered, have obstacled the establishment of an effective and autonomous Palestinian state? And the other question is, it is still worth imagining a state of what remains of the territories controlled by the Palestinian National Authority? To answer to this question, I used a mixed method approach, historical reconstructive, in order to reconstruct the path that led to the current condition that I call permanent temporariness, and a socio-political approach that helped me to understand the socio-political climate and relation between people and political authority in the Palestinian territory. So to do that, in addition to the consultation of scientific literature and to the end of the secondary data provided by the most important statistical research institute of Palestine, I also made a field research involving 23 interviews with privileged witnesses coming from the several level of Palestinian society in the West, in the West Bank, in order to know the perspective of the social component representing the Palestinian society in West Bank. From the research, from the data analysis, it emerged that there are two types of obstacles that hindered the Palestinian state building. So first of all, internal obstacles, so obstacles that depend, that are endogenous, that result from the choices and the conduct of the various Palestinian political and social actors. So part of the responsibility come from inside. And then we had the external obstacle resulting from the decision, the conduct, and also the omission of actors who, while external to the Palestinian context, have the power to determine the present and the future of the area. External obstacle are the most clear. For what concerns the internal obstacle, the first one is the social fragmentation and the loss of national identity. Indeed, there is a huge inequality of the living condition between West Bank and Gaza, even before of the outbreak of the current war. But it's important to consider that also there is a huge inequality even between the region, the district, and the community in the West Bank, where form of geographic, political, and socioeconomic fragmentation are present. Just think to the unequal distribution of the hospital and public service between the several districts of the West Bank that are not based on the demography of the area, but just on the centrality of the city. Then there is the political fragmentation. There is a big, wide constellation of parties and movement in Palestine. Of course, it's a good sign of democracy if there is a huge participation. But the point is that with with so many parties and movements, it's very difficult to find an union and a solution, because these parties are very fragmented between each other. Afterward, there is a clash between Islamic radicalism and secularism, because there are secular parties such as Fatah, the Palestinian Front for Liberation of Palestine, Democratic Front from Liberation of Palestine, etc., who have that have program that focus mainly on the national issue without reference to religion. So what we can find secular. And then there are confessional parties such as Hamas and Islamic Jihad that consider Islam as a system that embraces both religion and state and encompasses all economic, political, and social aspects of individual daily life. So there is a political cleavage based on religion that hinder again the apolitical union. Then there is an very important element. There is the lack of trust in the Palestinian national authority by Palestinian society. According to the poll number 92 carried on by the Palestinian Central I don't remember the name of the institute. It's a demographic institute, demoscopic institute. The 69% of Palestinians believe that the PA has become a burden on the Palestinian people, and only the 27% believe that PA is an asset for the Palestinian people. Basing from this data, there is the 62% of Palestinian population that support from West Bank and Gaza that support the idea of dissolving the PA. So, in other words, the organism that was supposed to to lead the transition from a temporary condition to a state. To lead the nation building process doesn't have any trust from the Palestinian population. For what concern the external obstacle to the Palestinian state building, the first obstacle is of course the military, economic, and colonial occupation. As I said before, Palestinian Authority doesn't have any real military control of the area, neither in the area A, on which, according to Oslo Agreement, it should have a full control. But I guess that all of you know that Israeli military force can enter in all the area in West Bank whenever they want without any control. So the form and division between area A, B, and C doesn't have any sense today. Also, according to the Paris Protocol, Palestinian Authority doesn't even collect the taxes of Palestinians working in the area C. So Israeli government does it instead of Palestinian Authority, and often holds such funds, the money of such taxation, as a form of blackmail toward the Palestinian National Authority. At the same time, the appropriation of the Palestinian land in the last 57 years provoked a transformation of the Palestinian economy that has become unproductive, dependent from outside, so from the donors, and subordinate to the Israeli government trade and monetary policies. Israel, in practice, has undertaken what Roy defined a de-development plan aimed at preventing the Palestinian economic competition. just think that Palestinian and Israeli people have the same currency, the shekel, with the same value, but the amount of money that are available to them are very, very different. Then the Israeli interest to preserve the status quo. Israel today doesn't have any economic cost for the occupation. On the contrary, occupation is an economic asset because Israel controls the economic asset of such water, mineral deposit, etc., of Palestinian people. So it needs Palestinian territory to control their assets. Then the end of the occupation would entail the necessity to provide a home to more than 700,000 settlers that nowadays they live in Palestine. If they have to move from Palestinian territory, Israel has to provide a home to them. And also consider that Israeli people don't want settlers in their territory. And finally, Israel doesn't want an Iran's ally on its border because it will be perceived as a constant threat. Then there is the interference of the international actors. All of us know about the strategic alliance between Israel and the US, and in the last days we have seen how this alliance is becoming stronger. Just think to the last declaration about Trump for what concern about his plan to transform Gaza. And then another obstacle is the conditionality of the international donors aid. Indeed, the international community favored Israeli politics and contributed through a strong conditionality of the aids that hindered the autonomous political development of Palestine over the years, because Palestinian Authority cannot have its own politics because it has to satisfy the conditionality that international community that nowadays support Israel in order to have such funds.
Rosa, would you please?
Yeah. I'm going to the end. Finally, there is the last two obstacles, the Israel strategic importance from a geopolitical point of view. Israel is considered by many countries as the only democracy of the Middle East, and it has a strategic geographical position between the Mediterranean area and the Asia. And then the loss of centrality of the Palestinian issue in the last year. Until the 7th of October 2023, the Palestinian issue over the years has appeared increasingly marginal in the global political scenario. And then there is the economic, and it's also due to the economic peace between Israel and many Middle East countries that started to make political agreement with Israel. So, since we have in the light of all we said until now, a Palestinian state is not possible, not today and neither in the next few years, many scholars have started to think about the alternative to a Palestinian state. There was several options that has been proposed in the last year. The one that is gathering more attention is the so-called one-state solution or binational state option that propose the creation of a single democratic state encompassing Israel, the West Bank, including Jerusalem and Gaza, with equal rights for all its inhabitants, regardless of ethnicity or religion. The supporter of this solution used to say that in practice a single state already exists, and it's Israel. So if Palestinian and Israeli become citizens of the same democratic state, they will have same rights and same living condition. But of course, there are some reasons against this solution that are based on the ethno-nationalism and conventionalism, and also they are based on the idea that until now, international community invested many resources to promote the two-state solution. So don't recognize the two-state solution would mean don't recognize the efforts that has been carried on in these decades by the international community. So what's the challenge? The challenge for the supporter of the one-state solution is to embark on a political path aimed at transforming the current conflictual scenario characterized by an ethno-nationalism and confessional rivalry in a specific secular scenario in which both the Palestinian and the Israeli are preserved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosalba. We can now turn to Ružica Ljubitić. Ružica, izvolite.
Thank you very much. It's great honor and a privilege to speak about Palestinian issue, especially after this great presentation. When we talk about Palestinian issue, we cannot ignore the human rights, especially feminism. Feminism as a movement, as a theory, as an ideology, it should inspire us to all. But what will happen if we use feminism as a movement in other contexts? What will happen if feminism is misused for interpretation of other ideologies? Those ideologies are very dangerous. Those are militarism, imperialism, and globalism. And they're all in structures in one marriage, in one serious marriage, who unfortunately has a permanent damage. Research focus is to examine the relationship between what is truly a woman empowerment. If it's their constructions in a framework of a military and a feminism principle, what it represents, and how feminist goals of empowerment often conflict with the practices of militarism. And in this context, I examined two media study cases of Israeli female soldiers, and the second one is Israeli female singer Eden Golan, who represented Israel on last Eurovision song contest. Israeli female soldiers in media narratives are often represented as super powerful women, as women who participated in women army. Let me explain to you in IDF from 1948, women have equal right to participate in Israeli defense forces. And Israeli as a politic is included on women rights. And they should also state that being a part of military in Israel is not just a women's right, it is duty and huge responsibility. And when we talk about militarism from theoretical framework. We must make a difference between different points of feminism, such as liberal feminism and radical feminism. Liberal feminism as a theory, it frames that women should be part of a military and they should be involved in all these tragedies in their agenda. But radical feminism and other forms as feminism, such as intersectional feminism, they say that women not just be part of military, they should be a part of a political and peaceful strategies. And those peaceful strategies are very well from all society, not just for encouraging of superpower of countries as Israel. I already explained that, and objectives and contents of these searches, as I said before, are two media study cases, and we can find how media narratives often glorify Israeli female soldiers, and we can see also visual and narrative manipulations who employs different patriarchal stereotypes to be a part of military discourses as well. And when I investigated those female soldiers in Israel, I researched through YouTube channels, and specifically it was on October 7 of one heroic Israeli female soldiers action. And in those actions, they say they killed 50. The other soldiers say they killed 100, and the third one said it was 1,000 Hamas terrorists. So that should be a warning that they are not correct in their statement. And they use a term like a terrorist, like Hamas terrorist, not just for a Hamas member. They use that term to dehumanize all Palestinian nation, all Palestinian people, and also not just Palestinian. They also include terrorism as all Muslim in the world. The second one is very interesting, and maybe it's not seen like a part of this subject, but later you will see how this is connected with this discourse. Adam Golan was last year singer who presented Israel on Eurovision Song Contest. Eurovision Song Contest, they call themselves like they should promote creativity, freedom, and human rights. So she needed to change her lyrics of her song, who was called October Rain, in Hurricane. But it was interesting in her interviews when they asked her, when journalists asked her about Palestine, she said that she was emotionally and psychologically prepared for the chanting of Eurovision fans. They shouted "Free Palestine" and "Stop the genocide." They did not insult her, but she said that she felt like a victim. Attention was also drawn because later, when she became popular after Eurosong, she said that she will join Israeli Defense Forces, and she said that she wants to be inspiration and motivation for their action. And what actually does it mean? That means that she wants to encourage their actions. But this context is wrong because we all know that their actions are bloodshed, occupation, and genocide. When we see those media articles, she says that she wants balance, glamour, and empowering in military. And when we observe the influence of young girls, it maybe seems very attractive. The young girls wants to be superheroes. They wants to be like Adam Golan. You know, when you see her, she's super powerful. She has huge nails, and she can hold the gun and shot in innocent Palestinian women and children. And in this side of feminism, we don't observe the other side, the Palestinian women who are pregnant and they are killed and they are massacred. And when we see those mainstream narratives, we can only see the Adam Golan feminism, and that is fake feminism. As already explained, her media portrait and image as well, it continues to rise. In this year, I must say, the Israel will also have a controversial singer who said that she survived the Hamas attack, and that is very problematic, and that should encourage us further investigation of how media are orientated to this side of image. So feminist critique in this context should be very serious. This is not just a scientific question. This is ethical. This is human question. How do we preserve women in Israeli defense forces? It maybe seems like very empowerment for me as a feminist. On the first side, it should be very empowering to be to serve as a soldier in one of the most powerful countries in the world. But if I kill innocent people, if I kill innocent children and women, can I call myself as a strong feminist? Can I represent those narratives and just defend my side of the view? And that is all some serious question. And this research is not enough to answer for all these questions. So I hope that I will continue in this direction. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm open for all of your questions.
Thank you very much, Ružice. And thank you. You were really very quick and very clear to the spot and very quick in your presentation. Our last paper today, Jelena and Isidora. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Doberka. I'll try to be as strict as I can be with this presentation. We have so many things to say, and I'll probably need to skip some things in hope that you'll read our paper soon to be published, I hope. So, okay. So as we heard, not just today, but also yesterday, history in Gaza didn't start on October 7th, but we thought it's really important to actually remind on some facts about what happened in Gaza after October 7th in 2023. Sorry. So on October 7, 2023, Hamas launched a large-scale attack on Israel, which led to approximately 1,020 Israeli casualties, including civilians and soldiers, and the taking of over 200 hostages. So following the attack, Israel began a military operation in Gaza, and even during the early days of the Israeli war effort, Israeli leaders made statements perceived to be genocidal, even on early days. So I will skip some things, so we skip in time. So the Israeli military imposed a total siege, cutting off food, water, fuel, and medical supplies, rapidly escalating a humanitarian disaster. Gaza's densely populated civilian areas bore the brunt of the attacks, with hospitals, schools, and refugee camps repeatedly struck. Reports also emerged of executions, torture, and the use of artificial intelligence to identify bombing targets, raising serious concerns about war crimes. Also, journalists were systematically targeted, with over 100 reporters killed, making it one of the deadliest conflicts for the press in the modern history. And after more than 15 months of war, in January 2025, international mediation finally resulted in a ceasefire, but by this time, Gaza was unrecognizable, entire neighborhoods were erased, millions were displaced, and the infrastructure was destroyed beyond repair. So everything that happened actually led to mounting calls to Israeli leaders to face war crime investigations at the International Criminal Court and Court of Justice. However, despite the scale of destruction, Palestinians in Gaza were left with little hope of justice or rebuilding their lives. So in the past 15 months, at least 46,077 people in Gaza have been killed, which includes about 18,000 children. That tool means that 1 out of every 50 people has been killed in Gaza. But many analysts and rights groups believe that real number of killed is far, far higher. But as I said at the beginning, the history didn't start on October 7, and as far as we know, fair number of studies have looked into Western news coverage of Israel and Palestine, with most suggesting strong pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian framing. Studies specifically highlight a lack of context that favors Israel, the privileging of Israeli sources, and overall framing patterns that highlight Palestinian aggression and Israeli victimhood. So accordingly, the subject of this research was media coverage of the Israel-Palestinian conflict in Serbian media, specifically on the portals RTS, N1, Nova, and Kurir. RTS was selected as a representative of Serbia's public broadcaster, N1 and Nova as, let's say, independent and opposition-oriented media, and Kurir as tabloid media outlet. So, given that during the 15 months of war, these media published really enormous, like an enormous number of articles. So we need to select some key events of the war to analyze the reporting of these media on this event, like on the day of event and 2 days after. And we know that these happenings are not like the most significant one, but we thought that we need to choose something. And those significant events does not end here. So we just choose something for this, for the sake of this research. And those events were the initial Hamas attack, the ground offensive on Gaza, the first ceasefire, the Israeli offensive on Rafah, proceedings before the International Court of Justice, and the anniversary of the October 7 attack. So when we talk about research subject and research questions, our main research questions right now were how many articles were published by each media outlet, and did this ratio change over time? And can the reporting be considered balanced, or is there a certain emotional bias toward Israel or Palestine? So the research employed the content analysis method. We really don't have enough time to tell everything about our theoretical framework, but I will say just a few things. Like the concept we used were concept of hegemony by Antonio Gramsci, ideological state apartheid, like by Louis Althusser, okay. Propaganda model and the concept of worthy and unworthy victims, framing theory and the victim defensive mode of reporting model. So overall, you can see that how many articles actually were published during this time, like from the October 7, 2023 to October 7, 2024, but on these specific events in each of these media outlets.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. Now we are going to start to present the research findings. It's kind of difficult to summarize it because, as Jelena said, we chose 7 events and we analyzed four different media outlets. I analyzed the N1 web portal and Nova S web portal, while the other 2 Jelena will talk about. We have to go through each of the 7 events because the reporting was somehow different. So there is no one, let's say, common characteristics, something that all the 7 events have in common. So the first event, the initial Hamas attack on October 7th, and one did not provide any context in terms of what happened before October 7th. As we may heard many times so far, many act like the war began actually on October 7th. Like there was not any military conflict before that. So and one even in articles that sort of suggested that they intend to provide context simply did not mention Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, apartheid policies, or mass human rights violations by the Israeli forces. Israeli military operations are consistently described in value-neutral and technical language, such as operation, military campaign, etc., while Hamas actions are described as attack, and Hamas as such is described as extremist organization, militants, fundamentalists, or even terrorists, but mostly terrorists when the article quotes some official or someone else. As you can see, statements by Israeli officials are much more common in N1 articles than Palestinian officials. As for the Nova S portal, Jelena didn't mention it. It's also tabloid outlet. I mean, it's not pro-government, pro-regime tabloid outlet, but it's definitely a tabloid outlet. Nova S articles also did not provide any context for the Hamas attack. They have a heavy focus on suffering of Israelis, and of course they use tabloid language to describe Hamas actions as brutal, bloody, terrible, scary, the worst nightmare, people begging for their lives, etc. When they are describing IDF actions in Gaza, they use very detached tone and value neutral terms.
I will continue with Kurir and RTS. Okay, so Kurir is, as Isidora mentioned and me earlier, is the media outlet that has really clear tabloid approach, which actually affects how information is presented, emphasizing emotional intensity and sensationalism. So really few articles provided historical or political context for the conflict. One article only attempted to summarize Israeli-Palestinian history, but actually omitted Israeli occupation of Gaza, and another article described Gaza's poverty, but linked it to radical Islam rather than broader geopolitical factors. The attack was described using various terms such as sudden rocket attack, armed incursion, offensive, etc. Hamas was labeled as extremists, militants, or attackers from Gaza, and some articles quoted Israeli officials without editorial critique, such as Israeli fighting human animals. Israeli airstrikes were often described as retaliation or simply war. Reports on Israeli bombing in Gaza included skeptical framing, citing Palestinian casualty figures as coming from Hamas-controlled sources. And I think what is even the most important thing here, there is differentiation in reporting on casualties, like Israeli victims were humanized through individual stories, while Palestinian casualties were reported more neutrally or with skepticism. Reports on Israeli military actions often downplayed civilian casualties in Gaza, and sensational headlines emphasized Israeli suffering while presenting Palestinian deaths with more detached language. When we talk about RTS, there is mostly balanced rhetoric and terminology, and reporting on casualties on both sides, but differs in how they are presented, like Israeli civilians, victims are mentioned early on, and Palestinian casualties are initially reporting collectively, like, for example, killed and wounded, but by day 3, RTS highlights the growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and there is shift in focus over time, like initially coverage focuses only on the attack and Israeli response, but by day 3, RTS begins emphasizing the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and the need for de-escalation.
The second event is the beginning of the ground offensive in Gaza, and one is framing violence from both sides differently, but this difference is not very obvious at first sight. First of all, they use a lot of passive voice to describe IDF actions in Gaza. For example, a hospital was bombed, civilians were killed, etc., etc. While Hamas actions are consistently the agency of Hamas is consistently acknowledged in the sense that they are saying Hamas launched projectile missile to I don't know what Israeli location or site. There is one particularly, I would say, sinister article that talks about forced displacement of Palestinians to, I think, to Egypt, and it's very obvious that they are talking about forced displacement, but they use terms such as relocation and transfer. This is very similar to what we now can hear from the U.S. President Trump. He also talks about some sort of voluntary transfer to describe basically ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Nova Est has on this, in regards to this event, surprisingly balanced approach. I am saying surprisingly because in other instances they do not have a balanced approach, but they remain faithful to their tabloid nature. So in this case, on this occasion, they use tabloid language to describe suffering of Palestinians in Gaza.
So when we talk about split, there is emphasis on Israeli perspective, like more personal coverage on Israeli victims, while Palestinian casualties are often reported collectively. For example, there was one headline like tragedy in an Israeli hospital. 9-year-old girl's heart stopped when she heard the sirens. That was about Israeli victim. Versus limited individual stories about Palestinian victims. There is lack of critical inquiry in coverage of civilian displacement, like article Urgent Message to Gaza Residents reports Israeli military warnings for civilians to move south without questioning where displaced civilians are supposed to go amid ongoing destruction. And there is sensationalist headlines and misdirection. There was one article titled "Israeli Army Rescues One Hostage, Girl Saved After Fierce Night Clash," which implies a civilian, but the individual was actually a soldier, which is a really, really different thing in war reporting. And there is double standards in some kind of assessing information, like when they talk about some Hamas released hostage videos, and when they talk about Israeli military videos of captured Palestinians. When we talk about RTS, civilian casualties in Gaza are explicitly stated, like RTS report on both Israeli and Palestinian victims with greater balance than other Serbian media, and with special emphasis on women and children as vulnerable groups. There is reporting on war crimes and humanitarian crisis. They cite sources that describe Israeli actions as potential war crimes and questions the methods of Israel's self-defense rather than uncritically endorsing it.
Yelena, we probably will not have time to have, all these 5, 6 events and for you. So to have a bit of time for a discussion, could you summarize?
Yeah, maybe we can also.
Wrap up. I mean, I just wanted to mention one more instance, if I'm allowed. During the reporting on the first ceasefire, the major topic was the exchange of prisoners, and it is particularly striking that when the media talk about Israeli hostages, they use words women and children, and for Palestinian prisoners, they use words women and underage men, which is. I mean, it could pass if someone is not concentrating. No, yes, but if someone is not concentrating on the test, but it's kind of very, instructing.
It's important that when we talk about framing,
Yeah,
what we mentioned at the beginning. I will just say something. Skip it to. Yeah. So we said instead of conclusion because this is the beginning of our research. So we can see significant decline in the number of articles on the conflict over time, and there is clear imbalance in reporting on the context of the war and casualties in like every single one except RTS maybe and NOVA from time to time. But we should ask ourselves why. Maybe should we consider the ownership structure of these media outlets and how it influences their reporting? Like it's really it's strange because N1 and Nova have actually the same ownership structure, and they don't have the same approach to this problem. RTS is actually part of national broadcast outlet, but it doesn't state some official Serbian position to this conflict. So it's really strange. So we need to think why is this like this, and maybe is there some kind of pro-Israel, pro-Palestine sources? But we need to research that in the future. So that's it for now.
Maybe one more conclusion is that the media that we analyze do not refer almost at all to international law, to international humanitarian law or international human rights law, although this is actually all of the issues discussed are related to it. So the discourse of international law is basically absent from media reporting. And the dominant framing is either geopolitical or just simple some perspective that is basically Israeli perspective, and that is supposed to kind of humanize Israeli forces or to make Israelis like someone who are us and Palestinians the other. So that's basically it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, first the reactions from the public, from the audience. Anybody around? Yes, please. Just introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Nebojša Đorđević. I'm finishing up with my PhD in sociology. And I would have 2 questions for Jelena and Isidora, if that's okay. First one would be if any of these media that you covered the Serbian role in the conflict when it comes to the weapon or. And the second question, I know that usually they always find someone in Israel who is somehow from Serbia or who can speak Serbian, and then they always say, yeah, it was horrible, blah, blah, blah. But did someone find some Palestinians who are living here in Belgrade to say about their perspective or how they see this conflict? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, just one comment also. It was really like great. All the presentations are really great.
To answer the first question, I'm sure that these media mentioned, especially the non-government controlled media, that they mentioned that Serbia is selling arms to Israel, but this was not within our scope because we analyzed it, as Jelena said at the beginning, each of the 7 events this day and the next 2 days. So it was not basically in these days that we analyzed. We had to narrow down the sample because we went in depth. And the second,
I wanted to answer the second question. So actually on the RTS, there was one interview with a Palestinian doctor here in Serbia in, I don't know, maybe Jabukovo or something. I'm not sure even if I said correctly. That's shame on me. But if I said correctly the name of the city, so they actually did some kind of interview with him because his father came here 30 years ago because of the occupation and war and because of actually our historical bondage to Palestinian people. So he came here and like the whole story was kind of, fairy tale because he found his luck here and he's so much like loved here, something like that. So yeah, there was like only one story like that in RTS, but actually RTS, I would say had till the end of these events, like more pro-Palestine approach than other medias.
And I will add that N1 and possibly NOS, I'm not sure they interviewed Palestinian investors in Serbia, but I'm not sure about some regular Palestinian person. No, not really. And at the beginning, for example, right after the Hamas attack on October 7th, they actually had a reporter from Israel, and he of course talked only with Israelis. And so the justification for that was that he cannot enter Gaza, but still it's the imbalance was striking that they also only provided Israeli testimonies by Israelis and none from Gaza.
Maybe just to ask anybody of speakers has a question or comment to other presentations? Not at the moment? No. Okay, go ahead.
I have 2 questions. One is for Aris and the other is for Lara. Concerning Aris, how do you actually see the role of the International Court of Justice in this situation and the charges of actual possible genocide? Because I've got impression that you see this institution and that you explain this institution as the tool of imperial forces. However, for me, it seems that at the current moment, the court, along with the public protest around the world, is actually the only barrier against the imperial pressure which we all see. And the other question is for Owala. It is obvious that your research was made before these events in Gaza, and I'm interested, do you have any information on how the healthcare would be restored in Gaza, taking into consideration the scope of the destruction, actually? And we had here and there some information on the healthcare issues of women in Palestine today in the war. So if you have any information, if you can transfer to us. These are 2 questions, and I have one comment related to Hamas. we all, because we had some part, I don't know who discussed, presented that concerning the different political parties or groups in Palestine today. I would like to mention that, as far as I know, Hamas was democratically elected, and it represents in some scope the will of Palestinian people. It is obvious that the attack on the civilians in October 23 was the example, the classical example of terrorist attack. However, it seems that Hamas is presented somehow as a obviously terrorist group. I think it is not in this situation everything so obvious, and that we must take into consideration inequality of powers in this situation, because in social sciences we have clearly the notion of state terrorism, and it is not used anyway concerning the relationship between Hamas and Israeli attack.
Do we answer now or?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for your question regarding the International Court, Criminal Court. First of all, I see a gap. First of all, it's important to, it's really important for me to say that the international human rights, law is very important. I'm not negating the importance of the human rights actions and human rights. I'm not, of course, we need to learn from it, and we need to expand it to the Palestinian issue. But I see a gap between the International Criminal Court that recently Trump is sanctioned, and of course and also they not only sanctioned the International Criminal Court, but also I saw that Israel followed the US in boycotting the UN Human Rights Council, as I see. So I see actually a gap between these party and the importance of the role that the court and the people on the ground play in determining what is really happening right now in Gaza. But I agree that the court plays a crucial role, but I also need to question its its reliability when it comes to how the countries actually in the European countries accept or negate the importance of the International Criminal Court, and do they actually implement this arrest warrant against Bibi Netanyahu when they actually declare about this arrest warrant? The issue is the implementation of these requests, of these actions, and also as we see, for example, in the case of South Africa, but we don't see it in other cases. We see how France and other European countries actually negate this arrest warrant, and they agree to accept Bibi Netanyahu's and other people in their own lands. So I see actually a gap between the court and the people and the rest of the governments. So the question together, and how we make sure that the people, that these court decision are respected also in those governments. So what I suggest is that the people need to put pressure on their governments, because I think that we are entering a phase where we are in some kind of dark ages regarding all these human rights actions, and also regarding the true nature of the International Criminal Court.
Thank you, Reese. I would also just add to your questioning of the courts, the fact that they have not and will not in present situation ever bring anything to court from the West, US, and everybody who sells arms and participates directly, not only at the moment, but historically.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the dependency, this part during the entire collaboration or economic collaboration between Israel and the US, established some kind of dependency, of economic dependency between Israel and the rest of the world, mainly the West world, and not only because we see how Israel also participated in the African, in Sudan's world and many states in Africa as well, by selling weapons and selling AI technologies, and also we see the collaboration between the Israeli government and Google and Amazon and the rest of the tech corporation, and how actually they serve and they are implicit in the genocide, as I call it, in Gaza. So this dependency, this economic dependency, play a crucial role also in how these arrest warrants actually manifested in the ground in the European countries.
Well, I will you answer.
Hello, thank you for the question. I just wanted to make sure that the question was specifically about the distortion of the referral mechanism, or the referral mechanism.
About the opportunities to restore the healthcare system, because many hospitals were bombed, and I suppose what do people, how they handle health issues at the moment?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In fact, yes, my research was conducted before the recent events in Gaza. The data collection was in 2021. And for me, it seems there is no certain answer to your question, because now, of course, everything was suspended in the last 15 months. And given that the ceasefire agreement that was reached in January, the assumption is to be implemented in certain phases. So we're still in the first phase of 42 days, and nobody knows what will happen. But what the practical arrangement on ground, that there is full suspension of the referral abroad mechanism. What the humanitarian health agencies are doing in the ground is facilitating internal referral, I would say, because the situation in the whole Gaza Strip was challenging, but it was more severe at the northern part, in the northern governorate and Gaza governorate. So what currently the humanitarian actors are doing is just trying to install field hospitals, I would say, on the ground, try to facilitate the movement from the north to the south, but there is no clarity, no sustainable or even a plan of what's happening next. Even the whole decision of resuming the provision of certain vital services such health in the north is not there yet. All the organizations are still implementing their services in the southern part of the Gaza Strip with a limited mission to the north, whether to provide humanitarian aid, healthy humanitarian aid, and health missions, for example. So I don't think that there is a clear framework or a clear plan or timeline when this could be restored, especially with the controversial announcement of the US and other international actors, which leaves again the people in Gaza with uncertainty on the next day. What will bring tomorrow to them?
Can I add something to what Awala said?
Let's just have a question from the audience, and then we'll come back to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Anna Rokušić. I hold a Norwegian master's degree in media and communication, in digital media specifically. And I would actually like to use the opportunity that we have Isidora here that is now doing a part of her research exactly in Norway. And Norway has been very implicated in could you just, from a perspective of someone who has been following their media up close, just give a short perspective on how the government versus people in Norway are tackling the Palestinian question.
My research, I actually did my master's degree, and that's my degree. I'm not doing PhD, so it was 10 years ago or maybe more. And I'm not following major media now. But anyways, it's Norway has been very instrumental. I'm not referring to you now anymore because the Palestinian guests are very much informed about Norway's role. How would you reflect on they have been instrumental in the peace agreement, and how has this developed through the years? Thank you.
To whom do you pose your question?
To our Palestinian guests. Thanks.
To Palestinian, Rosalba has spoken. Rosalba, would you say something, because you've mentioned these external factors? We don't hear you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Just let me check if I get well understood the question. You were mentioned what's the responsibility of the external factors?
No, the question was, how do you perceive, and can you maybe react on some of the Norwegian role as one of the external factors?
Yes, of course. The Norwegian role started with at the beginning of 90s. I'm also wrote this in my last work. The sensation that I had also doing the interview with Palestinian witnesses is that Norwegian authority, Norwegian state, Norwegian diplomacy pushed for achieving an agreement in order to have a political success in the international context, and it exploits its role of confidence builder, but actually it was not the right authority, the right subject, the right actor to have this role of confidence builder, because the Norwegian government had special relation with Israel. So Palestinians were the most fragile subject, protagonist of the agreements. So they hadn't the opportunity to say, no, we don't want to, we cannot accept this condition. But in that moment, Palestinians could not say no, because all the world would say no, so you are not doing nothing to achieve peace. So Norwegian authority, Norwegian government push on Palestinian to accept what was coming. But it was just for having a success in the international context. Afterwards, all the events that we know follow, and also the Palestinians who accepted the agreements were pointed as the responsible of the failure of the Palestinian state building. But we have to consider that the international context was not in favor of the Palestinian process. And what's the role of the Norwegian government now? We have to see, but things looks not very different compared with the past. I don't know if I was clear.
Thank you. Yeah, there is just this duality, a very clear difference between how the Norwegian people are reacting to what is going on versus the establishment. That was my the whole point of asking the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Given that we are at the closing hour of our conference, I would maybe just add a few words. That combination of subjects that we have heard today, from breast cancer to superwomen, to our boys and young men, to political processes and obstacles to health, to state building, it actually in a way sums complexities that approach to structural violence allows us to look, because it actually brings everything from discourses to hard realities to body and stone, and shows how these are connected, how ideas about certain people actually opens or forecloses their possibilities to achieve their life potentials, and how geopolitical contexts are linked to local, to the destruction of local especially. I really want to thank our three guests from online, because it's not really easy to sit an hour and a half in front of the screen and kind of wait politely for your turn and listen everybody, and to thank the presenters in the room and all the participants in the room for the discussion. See you after lunch. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.